Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you, Nick?
Good. Getting through this week's going by fast.
Yeah, it is. Busy one.
For sure. Smitty, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, Nick. Yeah, I'm piggybacking on that. Yeah, it has gone way too fast. Not enough time to analyze all the deals. But yeah, I'm taking one step at a time.
That's all you can do.
Right?
That's all you can do. Oh, Christina, I got a hold of Kathleen at Fairborn.
Okay.
She said that the property might be under contract with someone else. So I'm going to circle
Oh.
back with Jim Goldstein. Yeah, we might have lost this one, but I need to firm it up with him before we submit our application.
All right.
It was a hard fought battle if it is, but learned a lot. Definitely got some good content out of it.
Is this the one that you guys have presented in the last couple of weeks, or is this a new one?
No, this was one we presented maybe like 6 weeks ago. It was a while back. It was we're right on the 2-yard line, about to get under contract, but we need to get a variance from the city for outdoor vehicle storage for self-storage. And it was a big push. And the time it was taking to get that, I think someone else came and scooped it up.
Oh wow, that's too bad.
We'll see though.
Is this the self-storage one, or is this the? Okay.
It was a pretty elaborate one with self-storage, mixed use with like indoor rec and like retail, fast casual dining. So I'd shown the site plans, I think, a couple weeks ago with the
I remember. I think I remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a push, but definitely learned a lot, and it's a good example of what we look for. Well, it's 3:02, so I'll kick off the call today and we'll dive into it. And then if anyone else hops on, we can go ahead and catch them up. Just pull up. I'll let you go ahead and drive today, Christina.
Sorry.
I said I have the presentation, so I'll just drive.
Okay.
Cool. So I'm not sure if this was sent to us by someone, or Dan, this might be yours. It's out of Arizona.
We are working for that since last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
And it was under contract before, and then I just spoke to the broker last week, and he said that it is back in the market.
Interesting. Did they not close on the original contract?
No,
or
they did
trying to
not.
sell it?
They did not close in the contract before, so they put it back in the market with less price. It was the asking price before for this property is 6 million, and they
Okay.
lowered it down to 5.2.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Christine, I'll call you to give backgrounds and fill in the gaps. But everyone, we got the Hotel Blue Stone Casa Grande out of Eloy, Arizona.
Eloy.
Yep. So this is a hospitality to multifamily conversion we'll be reviewing today. And if you want to interject, go ahead and just come off mute because I have my windows minimized so I can see the presentation. We're going to dive into the property summary right here. So originally built in 74. It's operated as an independent hotel with renovations in 85. We're looking at 105 rooms total on a 2-story interior corridor building with about 4,100 feet of meeting space. Taxes right now about 183, so really advantageous there. And sits on just under 4 acres with a 0.95 ratio of room to parking spaces. So definitely a consideration when looking at the conversion for it. Christina, did we have any reports from the city on the applicability of zoning on this, converting it to
Yes.
family?
I just spoke to the city planner yesterday and the city supervisor. The zoning is possible, but there is no guarantee. So they recommended a city pre-application. So I'm setting up a call for the team and the city council for after we have received like feedbacks from the broker as well.
Very, very cool. So just a view of this, guys, you can see it's off a major interstate, I-10 right here. Here's the subject property surrounded by some industrial space, looks like trucks, Pride Travel Center, Burger King, fast casual dining in an area that's being developed. And as we get into the analytics, we'll be able to get a closer view of population, all sorts of things there. But just that exposure to a major interstate like that is huge. I-10 is heavily traveled in this area of the country. You can see the exterior facade here, solid brick building, adjacent parking spaces. Everything looks good from an aesthetic standpoint. Nothing that a little bit of CapEx can't do a nice facelift to. No major issues as far as repairs. Inside of the building looks great. Each room you can see here spacious, and this looks like the entrance to the hotel itself. As we kind of take a turn, we look into rental comps here. We can see the two closest competitors are 220 and 300 square feet, and they are renting at $1,275 and $314. So I don't know what the price per square foot on that is, but $580 and $1.05. So obviously we use the 540 Charis court for the rental comp here, but that's a pretty high square foot or dollar per square foot, which will be advantageous in underwriting. We'll see later on in this presentation. Diving into the analytics here, we can see a modest vacancy rate, which is always good, a little bit higher in the submarket of 9.2, but not into that double digits yet. Where we always go first is the absorption rate and population growth. So we can see -27, -1.2. So just kind of on the fringe there, but still a possibility, just something that we want to dig into further, assess if there's anything major development wise coming into the area from, distribution warehouse, and this can bring more jobs, cause more people to live here. Christina, do you know off the top of your head if there's anything going into this area to help vitalize it, cause for expansion or increased demand?
I have not researched on that yet.
No worries. Median household income looks good at 77.5. And we can see population growth is really strong. Overall, over the next 5 years, projected at 28%. And it's really rampant across all age groups, particularly in that 40 to 54-year-old demographic. But this kind of strong population growth is going to help offset any concerns we have with the absorption rate on this property. Exit price for the units are $144,000. So we'll compare that to the purchase price. If we're looking at 5.2 million and 105 rooms, we're looking at probably around 50,000 a key. So we're in that 3-to-1 ratio that we want to see. So that way, all in, we're about 70 cents on the dollar and have that value add component. We can see inventory in the nearby area only about 13. So it is a smaller development, but a city that has explosive growth here at double digits. And the rental comps pulled from CoStar pretty in line with what we saw from Rentometer. And we'll take a look at the underwrite and see how that really builds out. You can see here we have the 105 rooms with that 1215 rate and a square footage of 355, which is nice. It's a decent size for an efficiency studio compared to that comp that was around 250 on the previous slides. As far as underwriting, we came in here at $25,000 per unit. So on the higher side of CapEx, given the quality of those rooms as pictured. This is awesome because it gives us a lot of latitude on the conversion process. Anywhere around 15,000 is going to be your bare minimum to upgrade both the fixtures, put in kitchenettes, everything like that. With $25,000 of CapEx per room, it's going to give us a lot of opportunity to upgrade or room for any kind of contingencies. Looking over onto the right here, we can see 36.5 or 36.9% IRR. So super strong on that, and a 2.8 multiplier with 100% refi capital. And this is based on a $5.2 million purchase price, which is what the broker is asking for right now. So, barring any kind of unforeseen circumstance from the city or any desire not to rezone it, this one looks like it has a lot of legs on it and likely to go through. That concludes the property summary for this particular one. I'll open up to the group for questions. I see we had a few more people hop on. Bo, welcome.
Hey, Nick, I have a question about the zoning. Oh, sorry, you were saying something.
No, I was just acknowledging. Thanks a lot, Nick. Appreciate it. Really appreciate your analysis.
Yep. Yeah, good to have you on the call. Smitty, what did you have to say? Your questions?
zoning. So can you tell me like all the different zoning that we need to do? So what is the current zoning that we have now with the hotel, and what kind of zoning do we need to convert to in order to build them, convert them into a multifamily unit?
Great question. So here's the interesting part about zoning. It is jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So there's no common nomenclature or standard, although there's a lot of parallels from every different municipality. This one's currently zoned as CB2, which I would imagine stands for commercial business. And they'll sometimes have different subsects of it, like CB1, CB2, CB3, where they'll
Okay.
differentiate what is available there. Typically with a hospitality, in my experience, there is usually, it's not a huge reach to convert to multifamily. With some of the self-storage conversions with the retail sectors, it's a little bit harder because some cities will say we need this to be industrial, and they simply won't go for a retail to industrial rezoning capability or commercial business to industrial. As far as, Eloy, Arizona, I'm not familiar with their specific zoning laws or requirements there. But like I said, that's where you'll just go on to, the first step is reaching out to the city planner or the Economic Development Council and getting an understanding of the asset's history, what the city, has in mind for it, and all the particulars that someone who's local can offer. And then from there, I previously had done my own research on each website for each city to understand like what their zoning is. It can get lengthy and time consuming. So we've kind of taken a strategy of just reaching out to them, getting on the phone, having this conversation where they can expedite and say, hey, here's what is applicable, here's what's not. If you want to use this use, here's what it would have to be rezoned as. And then as Christina mentioned earlier in the call, we do a pre-application or pre-meeting application to inquire about the status of it, the city's temperature for it as well.
Okay, so there's a specific process that we have to follow to inquiring about the zoning and see
Yep.
what's their appetite for that. And I'm thinking if there is a lot of needs, demand in the area for multifamily, or they need housing, then I would imagine that would be easier to get approved versus like in the city where there are a lot of vacancy, right? In the apartments. That would be depending on that, I guess, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of the difference between like an economic development council versus city planning. The EDC is really interested in how do we generate more revenue for the city from a tax basis? How do we increase jobs? How do we make this more vibrant? Looking at it from a financial standpoint, where city planning is looking at it from more of a quantitative, like what is the aesthetic of our city? How's it going to attract people? What's this going to look like overall? So those two powers come together to collaborate and make decisions. Typically, the EDC is going to be the first person I want to talk to because they can champion this cause to the city council, and typically we'll have a good working relationship with them. People in the EDC are more inclined to seek these kind of conversions or opportunities because it's generating more taxable income. It's generating more opportunity for the city. So that's where I usually start. And like I said before, every single jurisdiction is going to be different in their process. Some are simple. You have just a form you fill out and submit. Other ones will request site plans, different asks to get a better idea of what you intend to do with it.
What does EDC stand for again?
Economic Development Council.
Okay, so that's where we would go first. Okay.
Typically, yeah, city planning is who decides if they're going to allow for conditional or special use permit or have to do a full rezoning. But the EDC is a close partner to them in advising on the city's economic development. And they're typically more pro these types of projects versus city planning.
So each city name has its own EDC, right? So in this case for Arizona, I can look it up like Arizona.
Yeah, it might
what
not
was the city
even be
name?
called, it might not even be called EDC, right? It might have some variation of that. Community Development Council, Community Development Group, whatever.
Yes, I'm
Got
going
it.
to answer a question, and Dan, I'll circle over to you. So again, there's no standard nomenclature. Most of the time they have something similar. So EDC or Community Development Council. And depending on the size of that jurisdiction, there might be multiple jobs performed by one person. So for example, in Fairborn, Ohio, the assistant city manager was also on city planning and previously on the Economic Development Council. So if it's a smaller city with less taxable revenue, they might not have this robust, right? If we look at like Jacksonville, Florida, with a million, just shy of 1 million people versus, you know, trying to think of a small city out there, Port St. Lucie, Florida, that maybe has 100,000 residents, the amount of jobs and internal structure you'll have at that jurisdiction will be drastically different.
So even before we submit any LOI to the seller, this is the first due diligence that we need to do to make sure it can be done. And if it can be done, then you would submit an offer.
Yeah, typically you'd want to take that upon yourself to seek out the zoning and kind of get an idea of it before submitting an LOI. You don't necessarily have to have it firmed up beforehand because you want to also get in conversation with the seller. But you definitely want to know what you're talking about and be able to communicate with that seller like, hey, this is what we're interested in. There's a contingency rezoning. It's currently zoned as X. The city has this as applicable use for it, XYZ. Dan, you had raised your hand. I wanted to chime in from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too, I know with the property that we were looking at in Encinitas, we had reached out to their planning department and economic development. And they told us for the city of Encinitas, we have to go through a huge kind of long process where you got to submit the application and then eventually it makes its way to I'm drawing a blank on the name all of a sudden, the city council. It's got to go to city council and then city council's got to vote on it as well. So it's kind of a long, and they told us that it might be a 6 to 9 month process. So that's something that the seller, that you'd want to make sure that the seller was on board with that, or the seller might not even want to wait that long as well.
Okay. In that case, it might not be worth all the effort because by the time you get the answer, the seller might have already moved on to the different offer, right?
Yeah, potentially, yes. And like Nick says, every place is different. You go to Houston, Texas, and there's no zoning, and you could just kind of do whatever you want with the properties there, which makes it a whole lot easier. So
Easier, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they have what's called grant deed restrictions.
So in the courses, we learn about putting together the analyzer. That is a shortcut like the quick analyzer, and there's like a long one. There are like 10 different tabs. I'm just curious, to analyze this property, which analyzer are you guys using?
So for this one, we used our full underwriting document where we're plugging in each component of it. It's not a lengthy process. You could probably enter all the data within about 15 minutes. The extra step is like understanding it holistically from a CapEx. So the initial underwriting will tell us, hey, is there a chance that this pencils or not? Things like the rate of rentals, like price per square foot, the purchase price itself, CapEx, like initial CapEx things that we know are going to be mandatory, can either eliminate it or make it a possibility. From there, you go through subsequent steps to understand impact fees to the city. So this is a lot of times where deals will fall out because it originally pencils at 5.2 million. However, the city's going to request, $3,000 per door for fire, parks, whatever. And each city service, if you will have a different impact fee. And they're unique to that jurisdiction as well. So it might be like, for example, there was a hotel in Kissimmee, Florida, where it had penciled about $36 million, $38 million. We went to the city and it was going to cost us an additional $10.5 million in simple impact fees. So that was a dramatic impact to the offer price that we can make because we have to absorb that.
Got it. Do you guys use is there any document you guys can share just for my learning purposes? Like what Jen and Jennings did, they have like a course specifically to explain how to put all the numbers together. Do you guys have something similar to that? I can just
drop your email in the chat and Christina will confer with Steven, and then we use a document provided by Servio and we'll send over what we have. Dan, if you want to kind of touch on the quick analyzer, I know you have more experience with that.
Yeah, Smitty, I know you've been in the training calls with me as well and Christina on that with Yaden's done. And the underwriting for the multifamily or from hospitality to multifamily it's a little bit more complicated than the quick
Mhm.
analyzer that we use for the multifamily
Ultimate.
value
Yeah.
add, because that one's really kind of a simplistic one where you could get kind of a quick answer right away, which is great, give you a good ballpark. But there's so many other factors, like Nick mentioned, the impact fees.
Mhm.
And get, with the multifamily value add, you don't have to do a lot of the other upgrades, you don't have to add sprinklers and
Right.
everything's the way it should be essentially, so there's a lot less costs involved with it. So it makes it, you
Yeah.
gotta factor all the other things as well.
I'm gonna
Which
pull up an
is-
example from you guys.
There's a
before
room
you guys-
for even a better negotiation, right? Because the seller had to consider all those things. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing the reason they want to sell is because the business is not doing well, right? And they just want to cash out, I guess, and retire. Maybe in most cases.
It could be, yeah, typically for hotel or hospitality conversions, it's something that's long in the tooth that's maybe not performing or cash flowing. So they want to recoup their income or their the value of the property. And if one hotel is underperforming, it's not likely for another hotel to come in and be able to perform well, right? Because
Exactly. Most
outside of
likely
maybe
there's something to do with the area, or people are not. There is nothing in that area that attract the tourists or people to
Mhm.
go there right enough to make it worth it.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's new development for like retail entertainment in a tourist setting, or there's like brand new Class A facilities, a couple miles away, it's going to draw people away. So for someone to come in, hotelier, and say, I'm going to put all this CapEx in, I'm going to give a huge facelift to a property that's built in 74, would not be likely, or like the one we saw in today's example. This is probably the most complex and best example of where the underwriting really, the rubber meets the road. So this is the Ramada Inn in Kissimmee, Florida. I want to kind of
Okay.
walk through. So with a quick analyzer, we might put in the CapEx per room and leave it at that, right? And see like, hey, where's
Yeah.
this pencil at? And then as you go through discussions with the city and the rezoning, that we got the conditional approval, but they said, okay, well, you're going to have to add water mains and fire hydrants at $100,000 per unit. So there was 4 units total. This is to add sprinkler or more water pressure to the building to have the sprinklers necessary for multifamily. And then upon further discovery, there was a mixed use conversion. So 75% of building 1, this is an 8-building property, had to be a mixed use component of retail or like fast casual dining. So in this part of the underwriting, we had to go in and say, okay, we have 8,000 square feet. It's going to cost us X amount per square foot to convert it and take out these apartments and then put in, like a Starbucks, a Subway, et cetera. So that's an additional cost there.
Oh,
You can see the
wow.
total for the
Okay.
units interior. The exterior facade, we put in $1 million there to work on just changing the facelift of the building. This was a 500 unit hotel. That's why the CapEx was so large on it. We might not need quite $1 million to change the emblems on the top of the roof. But there's some restructure of the parking, other stuff. We like to give ourselves a nice variance. And then you can see for sprinkler additions, there's about another $1 million. So hard costs alone were 22 million on this property. And I share this example so you guys can see that you'll have your initial underwriting with just the unit variance or the CapEx per room. And then as you do your due diligence, you find out more, there could be other things that have to occur for that conversion to happen. One of the things not pictured in here, but the 35,000, which you saw in the other example, is 25,000, was elevated because of the work needed to be done to each room, and each room needed to be individually metered. So rather than
Oh my
having,
God. Wow.
yeah. This was because of
That's a lot of
a
work.
previous hotel or conversion that had done this. The owner of the apartments had not paid the utility bill. The tenants had lost their connection to services, but they had been paying their RUBS, right? So it compromised the tenants because the apartment owner had not passed that money along. So because of that, the city wanted individual meters so they could be charged directly to that person, et cetera, et cetera.
So
But
there's a
that's
hard
city
requirement.
That was a city specific requirement though, in that case, right?
Yeah,
Like different city might not have that.
correct.
Okay.
which is beneficial, right? If we don't have to do individual meters, we save $5,000 per room on CapEx, and we get to upcharge for that Rubs Wi-Fi,
Right.
which is in our underwriting document right here.
Wow.
So you get to, based on collecting revenue for those utilities, we get to get a little bit of additional ancillary revenue from it.
Mhm.
Is this rehab combining any rooms, or it's simply leaving the walls in place and you're putting all new surfaces in place as well as the infrastructure like you're talking about?
Majority of the time, and I'm saying like 90+%, we are leaving the rooms as is. Because as you combine rooms, you're actually losing revenue.
Yeah, of
There's
course.
a premium. So if we look, there was 4 different room sizes here. The price per square foot on the 323 was $3.25.
Mm.
We'll use actually the 349 example. So 321 was the
Yeah.
dollar per square foot for rental rates. The 700 square foot room, they had suites at this hotel, was $1.99. So
Right.
if I were to take these 50 and drop it down to 25, I'd be losing out $1 per square foot on those totals.
I totally
Oh,
get
that's
that.
right.
I've
That's
seen it in
Then-
some cases though. Oh, keep going. Sorry, Nick. I didn't mean to.
And then I need to increase the CapEx because I'm moving drywall, the vents might not line up, the electrical.
Ah.
So you have a much greater CapEx need to do that as well.
Okay, fair enough.
And
I had seen a hotel of basically they were being sold as efficiencies, but they had no kitchens. And so you'd have to go install kitchens. So I mean, it's a motel, right? And the idea
Yeah.
of converting, right? So you got to install kitchens, and now you're going, okay, now you're eating into living space. How do you actually do that? A tiny little kitchenette, maybe. But I was just curious if combining rooms ever makes sense. But I appreciate what you're saying there.
It would in a very select few situations. So if there was a city ordinance that mandated a certain size of room, or I'm trying to, Dan, can you think of any examples where we've done that before?
Yeah, well, I know with again, the property in Encinitas that we had, there were, I think it was like 110 rooms. I'm just throwing a number out there, but there was only 90 parking spaces. So in that situation, when Stephen and I were discussing it, we needed to have at least a 1-to-1 ratio. So Stephen looked at it as expanding some of the units and making them 1-bedroom, not an efficiency studio, and making them 1-bedroom units, just to kind of get the units to match the amount of parking
Meet
spaces
the
and to meet the
parking
parking requirements.
requirement. Okay, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
because there was no room to expand any parking on the
Wow.
existing lot.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So that's,
Okay,
thank
thanks
you.
for that example.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. If the deal is just void on the premise that we don't have the needs to meet the city's rezoning, and then we can say, well, it's dead. What if we try to combine rooms and then see if it still pencils?
Right. Okay.
Reduced revenue is better than no revenue.
So the 35,000 per unit, do you guys just kind of ballpark estimating it, or do you have contractors that go
We'll
there
get a
and
GC involved. The preliminary underwriting, we start as low as 15,000 and we go up from there. I can't remember why, for whatever reason, we needed to go 30,000 to begin with. I don't know if it was just the state of the asset or there's some additional needs. But the individual metering, we added additional 5,000 to, and then
Mhm.
things like if there's existing kitchenettes, like let's say you have an extended stay America that you're converting, those rooms may already have kitchenettes in there. So you can actually reduce some of the CapEx charges. But in general, 15,000 is the floor. And a lot of times our finance guys will look at it like, let's edge that up. Let's be more conservative. Let's assume that we're gonna have to
Mhm.
spend more.
Because you
Yes,
can imagine
Stephen,
if we
I was gonna say, Stephen likes to go 25,000 is kind of his,
Hmm.
we were doing 15,000 for a while, but then he said, no, let's do 25,000 just to be on that conservative side.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you have 100 units, and let's say you just missed by 2,500 per unit times 100, that's a what?
Mhm.
25. That's a almost to 200,000 that you have to pay out of your pocket, right? Or sorry,
Yeah.
20,000. I can do math. So yeah, that's good to be conservative, I guess.
Yeah, so you just conceptualize it like, okay, we're putting in new floors, paint, we're adding a kitchenette in there, we're putting appliances in. And then you gotta factor in cost of goods, labor, all that kind of stuff too. So better be on the conservative side. And that's where if you find opportunities that already have kitchenettes in it, it makes it more advantageous for the deal to go through.
Mhm.
Awesome. Any other questions on the hospitality and multifamily side before I transition to self-storage?
I just wanted to throw in real quick too for Smitty's, with this underwriting also, with Yaden's one that he has for the multifamily, it gives you kind of the number of the purchase price. This one doesn't give it to you. You have to figure it out and play with the numbers and adjust your purchase price on line 139, H139 to find out those numbers that work for you too. It doesn't give you the number like that other underwriting does.
Right. So just out of
That's cool.
curiosity, I know that it's definitely more complex than multifamily, but at the end of the day, do you see that in most cases there's more meat to the bone on this type of deal versus just having the regular multifamily purchase, or is it just depending on the situation?
Everything's situational based. With a conversion opportunity versus a like for like, there tends to be more value add component, meaning I can get it at a lower price
Mhm.
and then utilize that CapEx to magnify the value once stabilized much more than let's
Right.
say it's already there.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
You're converting assets from one to another, right? And you're definitely going to be adding so much more value
Yeah.
from
And
being a
it's
hotel.
all about buying low and distress. Interesting, I'll point out here, this was sold in 2010 for 9 million. The sellers wanted 40.5 million and then raised it to
What?
50 million. We came in at
What?
30 and
Wow.
they balked at it.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And mind you, the property was cash flow negative and they had accelerated the depreciation. So there was no additional write-offs.
That's out of.
Oh,
that's
wow.
just
So for all
unreal.
intents and purposes, they should have sold. For whatever reason, they did not.
Hmm.
But my
Well,
understanding
it's
is the
Florida.
owners of this are pretty affluent, made their money in tech. I think this is just a little side project.
Hmm.
Oh, wow.
So if you got billions, what's a couple million?
That's right.
It's-
So relative.
It's Florida. What else can you
Yeah,
say?
so
Hmm.
that one was exciting though. The Ramada Inn in Kissimmee, Florida. Let me go ahead and pull up.
Hey, so before we jump in this, I had a question for you, Nick, regarding
Sure.
conversions, particularly to hospitality. The notion of office buildings be sucking these days, right? In terms of occupancy, you know, you've heard all the stories since COVID, and occupancy in offices has dropped, and I gather some pricing has also followed. Just curious about the idea of converting an office or some other sort of building like an office into a multifamily. You know, I actually came by a medical center recently that was on pretty deep discount. It's about 80,000 square feet, and they're only asking about 1.9 million. And it's a brick building.
Wow.
It looks decent, right? So I'm kind of like, gee, I thought about pulling that off the shelf and taking it to you guys and seeing what do you guys think. But I'm curious
Send it
in
over.
general what you're seeing about offices.
Offices, that's something we've looked at. I've tried to underwrite, I've taken a look at. We're actually looking for someone to potentially join our team that specializes in office conversions to multifamily. The trickiness of it is the design of an office, right? So you think about it, they're typically more square or rectangular with not a lot of natural light to the inside of it. So that square feet isn't distributed across where you can get a lot of windows in there. So how does one carve this out to make apartments that aren't just long and skinny, or they're going to be the way we typically envision them? So that's where the hang up has been, is like, okay, a lot of these office buildings just simply don't have design that can be converted without a CapEx that's so high, it's better to just tear it down and rebuild it. Now, with that said, there are exceptions. I've seen garden style offices where they're maybe 2 stories. They have long buildings that wrap around like a center courtyard that look very much like an apartment. That has feasibility, and that can work. Conceptualizing what does the CapEx look like? Every office is going to look different. So we know we're going to have to go in and demo it out a bunch of those, superficial walls and then erect new units. So it's going to put a little bit more expense there. But to your point, if you found an 80,000 square foot facility that could be carved out to include natural light in there. And you got it for a good purchase price, it could absolutely be a home run. We
Interesting.
just have not
Okay.
cracked that code.
I'll go back and look at that one. It also occurred to me that zoning might get in your way, right? Because zoning for offices, they usually keep offices far away from residential, it's like mixing industrial and residential. They just, a lot of places don't do that. So I was just curious if you'd had any adventures to relate about that. kind of
Yeah.
issue.
One of the first properties I ever looked at was an office building. And it was down in Florida. It was actually adjacent to a few multifamily and condo developments and a golf course. So
Oh,
it
I
was
see.
sitting on like a lake and it just happened to be in a residential area. Everything was good. The city had a mandatory minimum of, I think, 800 or 900 square feet per apartment. So right there, we got kind of stopped in our tracks. And I think they're asking like 14 and a half, 15 million for the office building.
Mm,
So just from a price standpoint, it was a little bit too much to purchase it, add in
I
that
see.
CapEx and then make a profit on it. So you will be surprised. There might be, offices embedded in areas where they're open to it. Or when I look at zoning, a lot of cities will be open to changing the zone of an area if it is adjacent to the same zone. Meaning like if I'm in a zone that allows multifamily and the property that I want is next to it and it's in a different zone, they will kind of keep it continuous where that zoning is touching versus if I'm just smack dab in the middle of something that's all commercial business and I want to go
Right.
residential, they're not going to be likely to do it.
Hmm. Well, gosh, can I put I can put a link in the chat. This is the
Yeah.
property I was talking about. I'll just drop it in there. You can just look at it real quick. I don't mean to distract the team, but
No, not
this
at all.
one caught my eye.
Yeah, Christina, will you take that link and email it to Dan, Stephen and I, and we'll take a look at it?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a former hospital, 87,000 square feet. They want 1.6 million. They're located on 2.5 acres in New Brighton, Pennsylvania, which I don't know much about. Zoned R1, the use is currently approved non-conforming, could quickly turn into a church, daycare, retirement home, school, hospital, apartments. There's a new roof, furnace, repaved parking lot, industrial kitchen, and cafe. The current owner
Very good.
rebuilt the entire wing, so.
So that is
Maybe
promised. I
choice.
think that the hospital piece is what does it for me because it's already set up to have rooms, right? Patient rooms.
Exactly. Now they'd be small rooms, so now the question becomes, is this a case where you do some combining to create attractive apartments? I know
Yeah.
obviously it was built for one purpose, you'd repurpose it for a different thing. I
That
don't know
would
if
have
you-
some visibility there. I mean, shoot,
Can you
Dan
see
sent
the
me an
link?
article 4 or 5 months
Just-
ago of a high school they converted into apartments.
Oh, wow, all right. Well, I don't
Yeah,
know if
look
you can
up
just
the
hit
link.
that link and open it just to look at the outside of the building, but you see what I mean? It's a 3-story building and
Yeah. Here we can take a look right now.
yeah, there you
It looks like it could
Yeah.
have some potential though, for sure.
Okay. go. It looked interesting
Yeah,
at
'cause you can see-
1.6. It's kind of like, been on the market for 164 days. I mean, clearly it was an old house that got turned into a hospital, right? But so I'll tell you what, maybe between now and next week, I'll take a run at this. And
Yeah, send it on
maybe,
over.
yeah, we could just take a look at it together. I'd love to see whether this would fly.
It's good that it was renovated in 2019, so you don't have to worry about remediation of
Right.
asbestos.
And
lead
a
all
new
that
roof
stuff.
as well. That's right, remediation.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to distract further, but I thought this was pretty interesting. So
No, I love it. That's what we're here for. That's why these calls occur.
cool.
All right, everyone's favorite part, my part, the self-storage conversions. This week, we're going to look at existing self-storage facilities with the value add play continuing off of last week. This is kind of a new lane that I'm operating within. Still scouting on the retail to self-storage conversions, but looking across the country at existing ones that have potential for expansion. A lot of times you'll see people come in there, lay the initial phases down, get it stabilized partially, and then look to just flip it quickly to get a return on investment versus a long-term hold. Both are beneficial. If you come in there quick, you get your money out quick, your investors' money out quick. You're going to sacrifice a little bit of their earning potential, but you're getting back speed to roll it over into another investment. versus if you're holding it for 5 to 7 years where you get to fully expand it, realize additional revenue, and then get a higher dollar amount when exiting. So this one is Best Self Storage. It's off of Groveport Road in Columbus, Ohio. We'll first kind of jump into the property summary here. We'll get some better views of it, but this is what CoStar has for it. It looks a little bit bleak here. It's built in 99 with 54,000 existing square feet, 2-star self-storage facility. So this is kind of the place I want to operate in, is like, hey, this is an underutilized or a 2-star versus like a Class A facility, because we can come in here. A lot of times we'll see that properties like this are mismanaged. They don't have a website to market their rates or be able to capture market share. They don't have anything on site to help promote service or work with people that are renting. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can do to increase revenue streams and get more marketing out there. It's up for sale at $4.5 million right now. And we'll kind of take a look at all the KPIs on it. 219 days on the market. At a first glance, the saturation of the square foot per capita is a little bit high. We can see compared to State Almanac. But upon further review, we can see a 3-to-1 ratio of non-climate controlled to climate controlled facilities. So what's unique about this is we're not going in, putting in 80, 90,000 square feet of self-storage. We have an existing 56,000 where we might add additional 20 to 30,000, which will help with that saturation as well. But the addition could be more on the climate control side, which would discount the saturation here. The other thing I look at too is what are the competitors like? If everything in that vicinity of 5 miles is built in the 90s, early 2000s, and we have a brand new Class A facility, it's going to attract more people towards that for just a marginal increase in the price. Population size is strong at 41 and 140,000 with modest growth. Median household income meets the needs. This property was penciling at around 3.5 million with a $4.8 million asking price, and is currently a self-storage facility. On this one, we'll be looking at about 15,000 square feet of conversion for an existing warehouse, with the other 39,000 square feet of existing self-storage that is currently 90 or not climate controlled, but 96% leased up. So this is a very stabilized, established self-storage facility. We'll take a look at $150,000 in exterior facade work, and additional $4 per square foot for repaving the property, and $50 a square foot for the conversion of the existing warehouse to a climate control. And you can see here in my notes that this one actually does not have website presence. That's part of the marketing package from the broker.
And when you're looking at the storage density in the area, the storage demand, you're looking at climate controlled separately from non-climate controlled, right?
Yes, this number represents all facilities, both climate and non-climate. But I'll be able to, in my reports, it breaks out the square foot per capita of climate controlled as well as non-climate controlled. So when I see a more saturated market, I'll take a look to see what the representation of each is.
Oh, I see.
I've seen that ratio as high as 10 to 1.
Wow, really?
Interesting.
Okay.
It's far less expensive to put in, a unit that you just drive up to, bolt down, you have a slab there, than to build a structure with HVAC and electrical, that kind of stuff. So taking a look at the area here, we got a couple major roads for visibility. This is the subject property here, residential right next to it and kind of in the surrounding area. Looks like some light industrial uses around there as well. But overall in a good spot in a densely populated area. Here's some additional buildings. This right here is the actual warehouse that can be converted into the climate controlled self-storage. Picture down here as well. These are the actual drive-up units that are non-climate controlled. And here's an inside view of that existing warehouse here. Not pictured as the mezzanine level that can be also used for storage units. And this would be the front office of the current self-storage facility.
Mm-hmm.
Some additional pictures here of the drive-up units.
Question about that warehouse. That picture indicated it was pretty tall ceiling. Is that something you look for specifically? Are you going to put 2 layers in there, or there's not enough room, or how do you scope that out?
So typically to do a 2-story facility, we're gonna need about 26 feet of ceiling space. You can go as low as 22, but it's going to be kind of a stretch. This one as marketed, I haven't fully checked it out, but there's supposed to be a mezzanine level. Like I said, it's not pictured here. We'd most likely just use the base of it with fencing over the top or create like a cage. That way one unit, you can't climb up to the next unit.
I see.
We wouldn't necessarily utilize the extra space above it.
I see.
Anytime you go vertical with self-storage, it's a little bit trickier too, because the tensile strength of a floor, most buildings are around 80 pounds per square foot, offices, retail, et cetera. Self-storage, because people are stacking things on top of one another, needs to be about 120 pounds per square foot of
I
tensile
see.
strength.
Hmm.
That's another
Okay.
challenge for office
enough.
conversions or two-story
Lot to
retails.
think about.
Yeah. So you can see this is part of the value add play here. These are the existing non-climate controlled drive up units, kind of like a gravel road here. Interior of those units. So great if you're just storing industrial stuff, things that you don't necessarily care about, probably wouldn't be putting furniture in there. So we'd have the opportunity of first converting that warehouse into climate controlled, and then in subsequent phases, maybe upgrading the facility as it stabilizes, include more climate control for seeing more of a demand that way. One thing to elevate the current rental rates of this property without touching the storages themselves would just be paving these roads. So that's why you saw that in the underwriting, upgrading kind of the aesthetics of it, giving it that like new feel, a Class A feel, where we can kind of match the rates of the competitors in the area that are a little bit more new, and things that people will appreciate. We'll get into that in a few slides here. This is a competitor landscape. You can see the blue dots represent new builds. So there's about 3 new properties going to the area, indicating that there's great demand and growth. We have a couple competitors adjacent to the property within that 1 mile radius. This red circle represents 5 miles here. So kind of scattered all throughout. But the most important thing to look for is what new self-storage facilities are coming to the area. Is there anything in the last couple of years that have come in there that's still in the stabilization period? And what's that existing supply look like in red here? And again, it all comes down to the square foot per capita. So to kind of give you a comparison of our thought process behind the value add play, we can see our 10 by 10 climate control is our flag bearer for, market rates at 114. But just like in multifamily, we're going to go like for like. This name gets me every time. Awesome Possum Storage. This is probably the closest competitor. It was built in 2019. We can see Public Storage in 2004 and U-Haul was built in 1984. We can see the difference in the rates here. So for Awesome Possum, that 144 rental rate for a 10 by 10 is what we'd be looking to capture that same Class A facility that's newer, because ours would be finished in 2023. So going into underwriting, I use the rates specifically from this competitor versus the average of all the facilities in a 5 mile radius to help get more of an accuracy when looking at cash flow. So when underwriting an existing self-storage facility, I have 2 parts to put in there. What is the expansion going to yield us from a revenue stream? And what does the existing stabilized asset have? So these first cells in each category would be the expansion. So we have a unit mix calculator that I've created and I'm happy to share with the group that shows the quantity of that upgrade. So for that 14,000 square feet, we'll see about 150 units, 171 units in there. The existing non-climate controlled ones are represented right here. So we have 10 by 10, 10 by 20, 10 by 30. And these are the rates that are actually shared by the broker in their offering memorandum. And then there's an additional 101 vehicle storage spots that they have marketed at $79. So we have our existing stabilized self-storage right here, vehicle parking that is also on the premises, and then the new additions we would do with that warehouse. All of this together would yield us a 30% IRR and a 3.47 multiplier. One of the cool things about the self-storage play is we see traditionally a higher multiplier on the investment. So if I were to put $100,000 in 2 years or 3 years when this is refinanced, I would be able to get about 3.5 times that, or $350,000. So while the total purchase cost is lower, the cash streams are a little bit lower, the multiplier is higher. So we're coming up to the end of the hour here. I'll turn it over to the group for any questions, comments.
So on that deal, could you put that last slide back up? Just want to look at those numbers a little more. And the asking price on this was How much?
4.8 million, and I had it
But you said
penciling at
pencils at 3.5 or
3.5.
something. I see.
So this is where I'll go back and try to understand, like, okay, they have it evaluated at 4.8, because they'll use a cap rate on this, right? This isn't a vacant building. So
Sure.
are they using a 5.5, where industry standard right now is around 7? Is there wiggle room in that negotiation? How much actual CapEx is needed? I said 60% of that place has to be paved. Maybe it's 40%. That'll save us a couple $100,000. The exterior facade, I put $150,000 in for it. Maybe that's a 50 to 75,000. We just have to paint the buildings. The paving alone will do enough. We don't have to put up too much signage. So as we get into negotiations with the seller, we can see, well, what's their floor? We can make counter offers. They'll make offers back to us. And maybe at 4.1 million, they're willing to take it. That IRR drops to 25%. Okay, well, it's acceptable. 30% is going to be a home run, but a 25% IRR is still good. We're still willing to take on that.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
Nick,
really
just a
interesting.
question for you, on my end, just because I haven't looked at many of these with you. With the multifamily, we look for the value add where rents might have not been increased for a while and stuff like that. Do you look for that a lot too? I mean, when you're looking at the underwriting to bump up the rents, quite a bit.
So that would be representing the existing ones right here. So these rents right here are not what the property is currently yielding, but what we
Okay,
would
gotcha.
expect after the conversion.
Okay.
And then on a property like this, you must be using a familiar expense ratio to build out this whole value chain. What do you use on a project like this? What's the expense ratio for a project like this?
So CRBE actually published one that's regional, and 33 to 39% is a pretty good area for expense ratio.
Okay.
The biggest swing will be on the taxes. So in some of these areas, I'm seeing 30 cents per square foot. On some of these areas, I'm seeing $1. So I try to keep all the inputs the same, because it auto tabs or calculates out, like, here's what the property management cost is, here's what the utilities are, et cetera, et cetera. So, if it's closer to 33%, it's usually because the taxes are lower. If it's closer to 39%, it's because the taxes are higher.
Nice. So a big
But
swing.
33 to about $1 per square foot's pretty normal. I've seen New Jersey at $7 a square foot, which was wild. Yeah,
Holy
I've seen some places at $2 or $3 a square foot, but for the most part, that's about where the property taxes fall. And I pull that from other competitor self-storage facilities in the area.
Okay. And so then those expenses, do those count on a standard, you fence the unit, you put in pedestals to allow automated access, everything's self-pay, self-service, it's rudderless, nobody's there? Or do you keep the office and you're paying a salary?
For the Class A facilities, we'll typically keep an office, on-site
Okay.
people there.
Okay.
That would be part of the appeal of that Class A facility. There's always someone to help
Right.
you. We'll have a retail shop
Agreed.
as well to create ancillary revenue.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
the cost of like labor for 1 or maybe 2 people to be on site isn't that significant. And then the enhanced security purposes, or if we need to,
Yeah, I see.
catch something that goes wrong faster.
Okay, I see.
But a lot of these ones I'm looking at, their existing self-storage are unmanned. You have a key fob, or they have a kiosk you literally walk up to and you type in all of your information, or they'll have someone, a third party off-site that maybe manages several or even 10 facilities like that. Almost like if you've ever called your doctor and they have a answering service.
That's right.
Right. So, we don't manage the property, but we've been taught how to do all the inputs and register you, and we're going to spit out a key right here.
Right. Well, this is interesting. I mean, there's a lot of profit in a project like this. Say so this place is in Ohio. You don't live in Ohio, I assume.
Nope. Sunny
How do
state of
you-
California.
You must have boots on the ground, right? How do you actually pragmatically get started on a project like this? You got to find a
As
team
the
on the ground.
acquisitions arm, my job is to find the deal, bring it to the operator. They're going to cultivate the renderings from like a unit mix, the architectural designs. They'll bring in a third-party management company. We're able to fly out to properties, walk them, get an understanding of it. And
Mhm.
then we have connections with general contractors in all major markets. So usually
Oh, okay.
through our network, we're able to find someone that can go out and see, what's that, or with one of our GCs, they can refer us to someone they know in that market.
I
It's
see.
a big ocean out there, but it's also a small world as well.
Well, having an established network helps, right? Starting from scratch, it's like, oh gosh, maybe I'd call you up and say, hey, do you know somebody in Columbus, right? I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's the way to. Okay, very
You find a
interesting.
good enough
Like,
deal, we'll find a way to get someone out there to look at it.
okay, I like that. I have no problem with a fly trip also, right? But I mean, honestly, the day-to-day, where the wealth is built is the day-to-day operation and the asset management.
Mhm.
So, finding a solid player, same with multifamily, right? Very first person I would look for is property manager in town, and a good one. Because usually a good
Mhm.
property manager has good people in their Rolodex, right? And they've got everybody dialed in who's worth anything, right? So I don't know what the corollary is here for that. Sounds like general contractor for sure for a conversion like this. That's
Yeah.
one of the main first
I think
people.
that's where broker relationships are so important because everyone
Mhm.
wins, right? The broker that's selling that property is going to get a commission on it. So
Right.
I've often asked them like, hey, can you connect me with these people? Because they're
I see.
local to the market. They have a lot of
I see.
insights. I've met brokers that have extensive networks and they're like, yeah, hey, you know what? I can help you not only get this property, but I can help you find tenants if there's a retail component.
Yeah, great.
I do have a
comment.
4 o'clock meeting, guys, so I have to cap it here, but thanks
All
for
right.
hopping on today.
Thanks a lot.
And
Really
look forward to
Thanks, Nick.
seeing
Thanks,
everyone next week.
everyone.
Have a good one.
All right.
Have a
good
great
one.
week. All right. See you folks. Bye.
Have a
Smitty, let's
great
go
day.
find one of these, buddy.